Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee. We're joined by TrainerRoad and Cannondale's Amber Pierce.
Good morning, everyone.
By our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everyone.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hey, everyone.
And that makes us the OG crew. Here we are. You're back again. It's good to have everybody. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, John?
Doing great. It was your birthday last week. Happy birthday.
Well, as I turned 40.
Yeah, big 40.
You know, I went on a little trip and I forgot my shaver. And now I'm like, maybe you can't even see it. It's so like weak. Maybe I'll have a little bit of scruff now. Maybe I'm going to go a little bit of a beard, mountain man, midlife crisis.
It looks good.
That's what you do. Chad, did you do something when you turned 40? Did you like change something about your appearance?
Yeah, just stop caring, stop shaving.
That's so I couldn't.
Chad, do you have any 40-year-old or midlife crisis tips for Nate?
Yeah, no, I've yet to experience my midlife crisis because I'm not quite there. I think I plan to live to be about 140, so 70s midlife for me.
That's a good plan.
Nice.
Good plan.
Full denial.
That's impressive. We're going to answer your questions. We're going to have a deep dive on stretching today. We're going to discuss stretching, how to do it, why you should do it, what it actually does for you. Also, the concept of does it actually make you faster or not? Because there's so many different things that we can do as endurance athletes, yet we all have limited time. So we kind of have to make these decisions about like where we allocate our efforts and resources because it's just limited, right? So we'll talk about that if it makes us faster. We're going to talk about heat training a little bit and how to do it at like accessible or different budgets or different accessibility levels and how you can actually accomplish quite a lot with it outside of the traditional context of, you know, a sauna protocol and everything else. Then we'll also talk about body weight versus strength training. That's going to be an interesting point and tons of other stuff. But before we do that, Amber, I want to, so constant improvement is something we talk about here at TrainerRoad, and your team has been working on some constant improvement with AI FTP detection. Can you quickly just describe what AI FTP detection is, then tell us what's new with it already?
You got it. Yeah, we're walking the walk on that company value here. So AI FTP detection is a new feature that we've released to early access, which means it's just a really early version of this. And we wanted to get it out to our athletes as quickly as possible. But we use an AI model to predict what your FTP is. So you no longer need to do a ramp test if you don't want to. On a day that you have a ramp test scheduled, instead of loading the ramp test, you can hit the use FTP detection button and see what your new FTP is. And then you have an option at that point of whether or not you want to accept that or go ahead and load the ramp test anyway. So ramp test isn't going away. You can still do it if you want to, but if you're one of those people who really struggles with that, like I am, you can just hit that button, update your FTP, and then we'll give you a workout to do instead of the ramp test. And that is actually one of our latest updates. This is new now. We previously, when we shipped this, in order to ship it fast, we hard-coded the workout replacement. So if you accepted your AI FTP detection and didn't want to do the ramp test, we would replace your ramp test with Goddard -4 as a hard-coded workout. But now you're going to get an adapted workout that is specific to your plan instead of just having a hard-coded single workout. So that is a new update that everybody should be able to see now. And then the other one is if you had more than one workout scheduled on the day of a ramp test, now we will be prioritizing the ramp test on your career page so that you can see that AI FTP detection feature because it is only available in the apps on your career page at this point.
One thing
but we have lots more to come.
There's one slight wordage it's more marketing than like inside TrainerRoad. But Amber said that we predict your FTP. There's a model that we built that does predict FTP, and that's in the future. And then what we decided is, hey, this thing could just be used for today. And then if it's that day, we call it detect because it really is that day rather than we're not predicting what it is that day. We're kind of like detecting what your FTP is, which is cool. And the other thing is Amber and I had some live marketing, like, wait, is this who thing last time? And the model does use heart rate if you don't have a power meter outside. Mm-hmm. So if you are riding a bike outside and you don't have a power meter, wear your heart rate monitor, and it does some cool stuff so that we can try to count it for your increase in or decrease or whatever it is, your FTP detection. And I would start using it for knowing that what we're going to do in the future, just wear a heart rate monitor for all rides. Chad said this for about, 9 years. And I was like, no need. He's like, but you might want the data. And I was like, well, why would you need the data? So we might not want the data now. So just I'm a little behind Chad sometimes. So just do that and all will be good.
By the way, this is my new favorite testing protocol. I really like it. I click a button and it's done.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Far preferred to doing those sort of efforts. Sweet. Chad, you've also made some constant improvements to our tri plans. Do you want to, once again, we're always looking at data and different things, feedback as well. This was a source of some feedback that we got from athletes. What changes did we make? Just kind of from a basic level, Chad?
Yeah, so the tri plans are kind of an unruly beast, or at least they were to initially build them. So been reluctant to touch them, but did recognize that the recovery weeks were not really recovery weeks. And in some cases that made sense. In a lot of cases it did not. And it got more complex when adaptive training entered the mix. So those recovery weeks in the tri plans are basically 3 weeks loading, 1 week recovery pretty consistently. In fact, maybe entirely consistently. Yep. And they're true recovery weeks. It's all endurance riding. If there's a brick, I don't even think there's a brick. I don't think I left a single brick in there. You can always add one if you want to, but I removed all the bricks. They were only 10-minute runs anyway, but on recovery week, it doesn't really make sense to just further your fatigue for no good cause.
Yep. So bricks have been restructured. Recovery weeks have also been restructured to work better with adaptive training. So exciting stuff there. Nate, we also made some improvements, some gender inclusivity improvements when you're signing up for TrainerRoad and then managing your account.
Yeah. So back in the day, I wrote this, I did like file a new project of TrainerRoad. Probably I looked at the clock. Like that's going to help. In like 2009, when we created it and creating the initial database structure, what I did is in the, like the gender, I put what's called a binary field. So it's called is male, true or false. So if it's not male, it's false. Since then, I've become aware that there's more genders than just male and female. So now in the app, what we have done is on the website, it's everywhere. You can have different choices for your gender, which is good because I could just imagine if it was me or my kids, feel excluded all over the place. It's like, hey, I'm not here. That's just not cool. So also, if anyone who does this, those kind of fields get linked everywhere. And it was a big engineering lift, and I'm sorry we didn't do it sooner. But it wasn't just like a wave your hand. It was like lots and lots of work.
Yeah, quite a lot of work.
I'm proud that we're doing it now, though.
Yeah, exactly. There's always forward progress, right? That's the goal, constant improvement. And thanks to the whole team here. I know I said like Amber and Chad and Nate, but like Nate indicated there, like that was a big lift, the gender inclusivity improvements, but all of these are big lifts. So thanks to everybody for all the work here at TrainerRoad. You're all awesome. There's more than 100 employees here. It's not just us four, believe it or not. Yeah. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of amazing things here, and we appreciate all of you.
And if anyone, thinks, hey, you shouldn't have done that work, like message me and just be patient while I ignore your message, because it could take me a while to get back to you. Just kidding. It's not, it doesn't going to take away from you. We build stuff for triathletes, cyclists get mad. Like, I'm sorry, I couldn't help. I heard some brand do that, and it was like Wendy's or something. It was very, very funny. But we're gonna. There's all sorts of things that we do that only help certain groups.
Yep.
And I know this will trigger. There's like 10 people listening right now. I can't believe you spent my subscription dollar on that. Chill. You're cool. You're still going to get faster. We're all going to get faster.
Yep. Yeah. There's always like a balance between things that we have teams building features. We even have like a team that's just focused on like optimizing small things. And so that's like the Strava images that came out recently, where they're really cool. If you're using TrainerRoad and you do a workout on TrainerRoad and it uploads to Strava, looks super cool. Gives you it shows your workout and what you did, but then it also shows how it affected your progression levels. Super, super cool. Those features come from a specific team. We call them they're kind of like our skunk works team, if you will, but we call them our growth team, and they do a lot of awesome stuff. So we have lots of teams on lots of different things all the time. So 24 hours in the old Pueblo. Nate, you didn't go.
Dude,
you said, yeah,
I didn't go. I could have gone. I forgot. There was a little like a weekend thing. I was supposed to have my kids, but then my ex was taking them on a trip, and then I got my birthday off. And anyways, you did it. And that race, man, I'm confused because I watched a part of it live and I saw some of your stories, and I know, let's talk about the awesome thing. Keegan Swenson, TrainerRoad athlete. What did he do? 21
laps, which is 366 miles and I think 90,000 feet of climbing. he never really stopped. He like, when I say
we
stopped,
a couple times.
yeah, a few times. On one single track loop that's 16 miles or 17 miles, just under 17. And it's all single track. It's all lined with cactus. I'm sure Chad's having like PTSD from even walking around that venue with all the cactus all over the place. It's just crazy. So much cactus.
You just got drunk, didn't you? I remember you were there with a backpack full of, we bought like a $300 like cooler backpack just for you to carry beers.
That's where the PTSD comes in, lugging that thing around the whole time because nobody wanted to drink. Understandably so. Just about everyone there was racing, so they couldn't have beers until afterward, which made perfect sense to me. But I still insisted on carrying around like 100-pound backpack full of cans.
Oh no, beer. Chad, your legend continues. People were speaking about, they were asking, where's Chad with the beer backpack? People still. so
that's glad I missed, but where were you the first year? You could have lightened my load, literally.
Beers with Chad when it's only Chad.
Yeah.
Beers
what everybody
Chad.
wants.
That was it.
That's what it is when John does it. First, it's so much fun. We're all here and we're all trying to talk at once because we all are like, someone to say something, but it's good. Yeah. And then second, if you want to complain about something, complain about us spending that $300 so Chad can like carry beers around. Like, you know what I mean? That's probably not the best corporate use of funds, but it's branding for Chad.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so he like, when I say he stopped, he usually just stopped and unclipped, but still stood over his bike while his team took food out of took wrappers out of his right pocket and then filled in fresh food on his left pocket. That was his system. And that was basically just like, and I think a couple times he sat down in a chair while he switched shoes or put on leg warmers or something. That was it. And that sit down in a chair was probably less than 30 seconds. So just crazy. Like, in his lap times for points of relevance, once again, this is like a 17-mile lap. Somebody do the kilometer conversion for me here, 17 miles to kilometers. But he was doing laps at around, I think he averaged somewhere around like a 1 hour and 10-minute pace. It's pretty fast. Like that's a quick pace on that course for him to be able to carry. His first lap was under an hour, which is really, really fast. That was my all out pace, was under an hour. So, but super cool. I got to meet so many podcast listeners, TrainerRoad athletes, everything else, whether it was out on course. It was cool. We kind of, with our team, we were talking about like how many people we would pass each lap because we had a totally non-competitive team of 7 people that were there and just having a blast. And I lost count at 100 people halfway through my first lap. It was just tons of people. A very large portion of those people are probably listening to this podcast right now and everything else because you were giving me cheers saying, go TrainerRoad, or where's Chad, or where's Nate, and like, and where's Amber, like the whole thing. It was cool. It was just amazing to meet all of you, chat with you, and just like hang out in the whole village, the pop-up city that is 24-hour town. It was just a cool time. Yeah, it was a blast. I did destroy my wheel though. I only got in 1 lap. So
only 1 lap? Oh, that's what Sophia did too.
No, she did 2 laps. That was her plan. Sophia was a part of our team. She was like, I'm going to do 2 laps on the first day. I'm going to go home and sleep in my own bed. And then I'll come back the next day if I want to do a lap. And that's my contribution to the team. And we're like, you know what, pro athlete, that's awesome. You stick to your training plan. You do what you need to do. We're just stoked to have you jump in whenever you want. So Ryan did first lap in jorts, of course. Ryan Standish, TrainerRoad employee and pro mountain biker. Jorts guy. And then Sophia did 2 laps, and then I did 1 lap. And at that point, even though I blew up my wheel and had to run it in at the end, we were in first place, which is pretty awesome. So we were the fastest team, which is great.
For the corporate division.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. For the corporate division. I think overall we were second, which is still pretty darn good. Pretty awesome. So after that time, granted, after that, we let go of all that. And we had, my brother was doing his first mountain bike event, which was really cool and fun to support him in that. His boss came because he also rides and he's also a lot of fun. My friend Neil and Sean, it was awesome.
Did you do more laps? Did you get another wheel, or did you just stop?
No, I could have gotten another wheel, but I was at a race without the weight of expectations. And I've never had that ever in my life. Like, I've never been able to just be there and just enjoy. I blew up the wheel. My goal was to do a sub-hour lap. And I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do that on the first time because of traffic, lap traffic. But even with running the last 0.2 miles or so, I still was sub-hour. So I got that done. And after that, I just had a good time. Enjoyed time with everybody else.
I'll tell you a secret, John.
Yeah.
You can go to any race and just enjoy it. This isn't the first one that you had to not to do this.
I know this is.
You can
this
even
is what
race
growth looks
competitively
like,
and enjoy it.
This is what growth looks like.
That's the key. Amber, you ever have any races that you were competitive in, but you actually just enjoyed the whole time?
100%. Yeah.
Did that happen later in your career? Or
Definitely more often later in my career, because I felt a lot, not less pressure. Pressure, anybody can put pressure on you, but the only pressure you're really going to feel is the pressure that you allow yourself to feel. So I got a lot better at managing that toward the end of my career.
I think it would be inaccurate to say that I race without like fun as well. Like, even though I put a huge amount of pressure on myself, and then we also have all the other podcast listeners and everything else that are an event that also that's an added weight of pressure, everything else, but I still have a blast at the races I do. Even national championships, like the highest stakes ones. It was just at this time I was like, I accomplished my goal, and right now I'm fine. Like, I have checked the box. I'm okay with not going out and doing more. So.
It's a continuum though, right? So it sounds like this one, although you've always had fun, this was a dramatic shift. And my question is, is different than other ones?
I'm not sure I had more fun at this one than others. It was just different. It was like the vibe at 24 hours in the Old Pueblo is whatever you want it to be. For some people, it's super competitive. For some people, it's just a lot of fun. And it was at that point, I was like, I'm just going to kick back and enjoy the experience of the event in general, rather than just the racing part. Yeah. So, I mean, I could have begged, borrowed, and scrounged a wheel for sure. And I could have done more laps, but I just chose not to. And it wasn't like I was letting the team down. Our goal wasn't to get in a ton of laps. Our goal was to just, have a good time and everybody get out what they needed out of it. So,
I think this is sorry, John, I interrupted you.
No worries. I think that there is a balance, and I think that I wrestled with that years ago in terms of racing not being fun at all. Because if you think about it, growing up, I raced dirt bikes, I raced skis, like I was always racing, and it was very much not fun at different points in my life. And I had to get to the point where, I would have never raced bikes again if I hadn't figured out, or I would have never raced bicycles years after I quit racing anything. I would have never raced bicycles if I didn't figure out how to have fun while, accomplishing whatever personal goals I had with it. So, but it's a balance. It's easy to, even though you've learned it, it's easy to let it get out of whack for sure.
Two things about that. Sometimes the universe goes, John, like, you shouldn't really race anymore because your wheel was like tacoed. And two, I think there's a whole bunch of people who use TrainerRoad and listen to it, who they're not really focused on the exact outcome, but they want to be fit for this event and just have fun. They want to achieve it. Like, this is triathletes. They might be going against themselves in some kind of like, I want to have this kind of time or something, but they're not overly competitive, like at a national level or trying to actually win the race. It's really the fast gets them to enjoy the race more. And I think we're going to talk about that even more over coming months and stuff, but that's a really cool, especially with gravel and mountain bike in general, like all these kind of things. You don't have to always win. I think you probably know that by listening to this, but it's good to say. Yeah,
for sure. There's I think Pete said it in his video that we have on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TrainerRoad. Go check that out, where he says there's different measures of success. Pete's raced a lot and he's had to figure that out. Just like Amber has raced a lot, just like Chad. Nate, you've raced a lot. We've all done that. And you do learn different measures of success for sure. So not everybody can win. There's only one Keegan Swenson that could win that one. Lael Wilcox, by the way, just congrats to her. She did 17 laps, solo female. Incredible. And she's also, I don't know if she's ever done a 24-hour mountain bike event. So it was cool to see somebody that's well known for everything from like, she's done Ram solo. She's done so many incredible, crazy routes, and to see her to mountain
Silk Road, event. I think. Yeah.
Silk Road.
Won that solo.
It's pretty cool. She's an amazing athlete. So it was cool. With that said, we also have to say congrats to Kent Main, one of our TrainerRoad employees, won a stage of the Tour de Rwanda. Pretty amazing. We also have employees getting ready, I think, for Cape Epic. I'm not sure if any of our South African racers are doing Cape Epic this year, but super exciting. Sophia is going back to do Cape Epic, and she is specialized number one bet. She is on the factory team, which is really exciting. So she's going to get a full crack at it. Really cool stuff. So with all of that, thanks everybody for saying hi at 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo. So cool to see you all and to spend some time with you. Let's get into the deep dive. Jack says, so actually, the deep dive in general, Chad, should we just approach the topic? And do you have something you want to say before we get into some questions that guide us down the rabbit hole of stretching here?
Well, actually, I have a question for you because the question that I moved around, I wasn't sure how this folded into the stretching question. So I feel like this is almost outside of the deep dive if we want to talk about this one first.
Let's cover him after. That'll be easier. Let's cover Jack's question after this. Then.
Okay. Okay.
But Zach's question then, let's get into that. Do you want me to read Zach's question and then go in, Chad? Is that how you want to go with this?
Yeah, because it sets it up nicely, and then we can just pluck off each of those individual. I think there's 9 of them. Yeah,
awesome.
9 individual questions that are related, some overlap as well.
Love it. Okay. Zach says, love the podcast, 5 stars. For those wondering, 5 stars, that means rating. You can now rate the podcast on Spotify. So everybody listening to this, if you have Spotify, please go over there, rate the podcast 5 stars. You can give us reviews as well on the App Store or on the podcast, whatever podcast app you use. Please do that. And let us know if we don't earn a 5-star review, just send us a message. Go to trainerroad.com/podcast and you can leave a message right there where you submit your questions and let us know what we can do to earn a 5-star review. So that, and then sharing this podcast on TrainerRoad is the best thing you can do to help us. It's fantastic. There we go. Nate just rated 5 stars.
Boom.
If you're joining on YouTube, then you could see that. But we got the audible version too.
It literally took 10 seconds.
There we go.
And it helps us. I mean, our marketing budget, I don't know if you've noticed, but like, this is kind of it. He was a little bit more than this, but it's not that big. So the way that we've always grown are from athletes telling other athletes about us. And part of that are reviews. You tell friends, you post in groups, all that stuff helps. So if you're loving AI FTP detection, post about that. That's very unique. The way that we do it too, we don't have to have all out efforts. And sharing it like this in reviews, amazing, amazing, amazing. That then we put back into the company, we grow more. We create more stuff, and it's a snowball of effect. So you do get something out of it.
Yes. Share with your friends. Thank you. Okay. Zach says, I'm an older rider. He mentions 50-ish years old. And I find keeping on top of my mobility is a constant struggle while training. Pre-exercise, post-exercise, dynamic, static, under load. What combination works best? I enjoyed the podcast with Kelly Starrett, which by the way, you can go back. I believe that was 154. I could be wrong though. Maxine, maybe you can check on that, or somebody in the live chat can check on it. But it was a fantastic podcast with Kelly Starrett, and he is from Mobility WOD, or actually the Ready State. Forgive me, it used to be Mobility WOD, but the Ready State, and he's just a fantastic resource on this. He says, but I would love Coach Chad to do a deep dive on mobility. And he says, I love those. Keep the deep dives coming, as well as recommend maybe some mobility exercises. Heck, even if Coach Chad could come up with some benchmarks for mobility, that would be awesome. Again, love the platform and love the podcast.
I have to say before we start, Amber, you grew up in the 80s. You went to school in the 80s. This was beaten into us. If you don't stretch, you're going to die before you work out, right? It was static stretching. And it's like, I even had it where some people like at swim team, older people, they saw me getting without stretching. They would physically stop me. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you got to get out and stretch. Why are you getting, you're going to die. Like you're going to drown. I don't know. So I'd love to hear.
Is that myth number 1 that we're going to bust right here, Chad?
Yeah. I mean, especially back then there was, just no scientific evidence to support it. Just none. It was all conjecture. I mean, we didn't have blogs back then, but I don't know.
Got to warm up.
Where it all came from.
Poor
it was coaches, high school coaches.
Yes.
What'd you say, Amber? It's what?
My poor shoulder capsules. Like I stretched them, like just stretch the snot out of them. Like eventually had to get shoulder surgery on one of them because I stretched it so much that the capsule actually became unstable. So yeah, good times.
It is kind of crazy. Sorry, Chad. I'm running on a tangent before you even get into the deep dive. Cool.
We have all day.
I
don't. Because when you look at like pro swimmers, their shoulder mobility is weird. Like I'm sure y'all have seen like pro swimmers in the Olympics or anything else when they're warming up and they like swing their arms all over the place. They go in directions that normal arms do not go. It's pretty crazy. But that kind of makes sense though, right, Chad? Because those athletes need to explore pretty wide ranges of motion, particularly with their shoulders. Whereas, a cyclist, perhaps it's not quite as key to have that sort of level of mobility.
For swimmers, I think that's a pretty relevant range of motion. For most of us, it's not.
Yeah, that's probably a good point to get to start off on flexibility versus mobility and discuss that, right, Chad?
Yeah, let's just put that to bed because I'm pretty sure we butchered this many podcasts back when we just made it way too complex.
Yeah.
So let's just kick this off before we get to the individual questions with just two basic definitions: flexibility and mobility. So flexibility is the static maximum range of motion of a joint. So basically, this is what's limited by the joint structure itself. And really, that's as simple as bones and ligaments. So if you were to look at a skeletal system free of the muscles, the tendons, the fascia, everything else, you would just see, just looking at bones and ligaments that connect them, that gives you a sense of the joint's flexibility. It's unencumbered by anything. This is where mobility enters the picture, because this is now the ability to move freely and easily through that range of motion. So now we add the muscles and the tendons and the fascia back in, all the things that could potentially restrict that range of motion. And now we see how much of that range can be expressed. And this is super important: without pain, without restriction. Because if you have either, it's not really a true range of motion. It's forced, it's painful, it's not usable, and it is limiting, restricting, and it does not enhance performance. So we hear often people say, I just don't have the flexibility to whatever. Well, they probably do. I mean, there are some genetic limitations that do enter the picture, but by and large, it's their mobility that's lacking. So really simply, mobility is how much of the range of motion can you access, just how mobile is that joint.
So when you say access, you mean like actually functionally put to use?
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Move through pain-free, comfortably, powerfully when necessary, if it's, again, a relevant range of motion to your discipline.
And which is for cycling in particular, when we're talking about you're going to explore a very specific range of motion, you will do so repeatedly, many times. So if you do have any sort of impingements or inability to be able to actually productively work within that range of motion, it's going to cause issues, right, Chad?
Yeah, and cycling's an interesting scenario in that some of our lower body has to be not hypermobile, but definitely mobile, although it's restricted to a particular plane of motion. And our upper bodies are really very fixed, depending on your discipline, even more fixed than others. I mean, if you think of a full distance triathlete, that position is so fixed. But if you think of a downhill mountain biker, that's a very mobile position. So it's hard to compare the two. And the mobility, even across riders, is drastically varied.
Remember that? Yeah. Remember when we were working with Lee McCormick from Lee Mike Spikes, Nate? And like when we were starting to explore the range of motion that we needed to be able to descend, like our hips hurt. Remember that? It was crazy.
Yeah, it was my glute medius that actually got super tired because in that range of motion, I did not have the muscles to do it like 3 times, and I was like, "Ooh!" And that's because there's some stability side to side, which I never worked as a triathlete. I did, but even as a triathlete, I really didn't do it that much. But as a cyclist, we don't do much side to side work. So when I tried to go over to mountain biking and had to use that, definitely was a limiting factor in my descending.
Yeah. No doubt. By the way, the episode, thanks to Jesse, one of our awesome copywriters here at TrainerRoad, 222 is the episode with Kelly Starrett. That's the episode there. So if you're joining us in the live chat, you would have already seen that. If you're listening, hopefully that helps you. Maybe that's why, Chad, this is a generalization. I'm not even going to say it. Generalizations aren't needed here. Okay, moving on from there. So Chad, when it comes to stretching, Nate was talking about this static stretching thing that he had to do in grade school growing up. And there's a lot of different ways to stretch: static or dynamic. Are those kind of the two basic categories?
Yeah. So the question was posed as, should cyclists do dynamic or static stretching? And I took this as an opportunity to reframe the question and make it more general and ask, should cyclists stretch at all? Which is a fair question considering what we just described and a couple other reasons I'd like to mention. So really, this is what's the rationale for improving mobility or even adding mobility training to our regimen? We're already stretched. Why would we possibly pile more onto this? I see this coming down to 2 equally important reasons. And the first is that adequate mobility, I consider it vital to good health and general well-being. And I don't think many people would argue with me on that. When you have restricted movements, it simply leads to a less than satisfactory lifestyle. And I mean, in general, across the board. I've been dealing with the shoulder issue. That's my most recent issue. And I just resolved it maybe a week ago, and it's been liberating. It affected my life in so many ways. I mean, even sitting here on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, just lifting my cup of coffee, I had to do it with my elbow in a particular position. I had to kind of brace for the little twitch that would come with just lifting a cup of coffee. I mean, even an unweighted arm, it hurt me. And I can steer this at all of you because,
dude,
I mean, we know Jonathan. We know Jonathan in particular has already talked about, dealt with, addressed, seen, traveled great distances to see a physical therapist. You have, and I bet all of you have, experienced movement restrictions and pain that goes with it, that affects your day-to-day, that affects your mental state, that degrades your confidence, and it can downright butcher your motivation. I mean, everything I wanted to do out in the gym, and I have quite a fancy gym and I keep making it fancier, and I'm so restricted. When you have a shoulder that doesn't accommodate much movement, you can't do a heck of a lot. And when you were a cyclist and you're already bombing your lower body with all the stuff we do on the bike, you really can't do a lot. So it's, and let me ask you, I mean, Jonathan, we've talked about it, but Amber, Nate, does anything spring to mind?
Oh man, so many times. It's I feel like every time I have some kind of a restriction like this, it's this really powerful reminder that our bodies are extremely efficient. In biology, physiology, we talk about metabolic cost. Our bodies they do not waste energy, and they do not waste, they don't waste anything that's going to require metabolic cost. And so everything is very efficient. And then when you have some kind of a restriction, you realize, like, very concretely just how much it affects everything else, because we don't have a lot of buffer. It's just not built in that way.
Yeah, and that's a super good segue into what I consider to be the second most important point for rationalizing or incorporating mobility training into what all the things we already have to accommodate. And that's excellent mobility is absolutely necessary when the goal is to optimize movement. So if we're looking for optimization, then nothing short of excellent is going to suffice. It's hard to do anything really well if you're fighting your own body. It's pretty simple. And what we do isn't hyper technical in nature. The movements we do, I mean, especially if you're clipped in, seated on your bike, you can ride very sloppily and still turn those pedals over. So it's not highly technical, like say throwing a javelin, where every little nuance change in what you do carries big outcomes, but it is hyper repetitious. So if we have a single small movement fault and we multiply that times hundreds, thousands, even millions of times, and that's literal, millions of times, we'll repeat this. This is the very nature of overuse injuries. And it's not that we use it too much, it's that we use it improperly. Our bodies are capable of being utilized again and again and again for the same joint action, the same muscle action. But if we do it improperly, down the line, it's going to lead to issues. And it's because of this that I believe that mobility is one foundation among a small handful of them for becoming as fast as you can be. If it's not there, don't plan on ever achieving that.
Another way of looking at this is your body is always trying to help, right? So your body is going to try to optimize based on the training, your fueling, everything else that you're doing. And the fewer constraints that your body has, the better it can optimize. And so when you have less mobility, you have more constraints. When you have better mobility, you have fewer constraints, and you give your body the freedom to explore that useful, accessible range of motion and determine what the best movement pattern, most optimal movement pattern is going to be. You can't do that when you have too many constraints. Completely.
And this kind of brings me to a side point that I do want to bring up. It's not an equally important reason. I feel like it's a combination of a result of these two reasons or an offshoot of it. But mobility training is something that offers us the opportunity to suss out what I'll refer to as referred limitations. So we've talked about referred pain, or what referred pain is. It's something in one part of the body is actually causing pain in another part of the body. And the same thing happens with our musculoskeletal system and our flexibility and mobility limitations. And there's just too many examples to mention, but let me do some pertinent ones. First, tight quads can cause knee problems. And I linked to a study on patellar tendon issues because I know a lot of us deal with those, if not all of us, at some point in time. I mean, just tight quads can actually lead to knee pain, and it's so simple to address. Static stretching and dynamic stretching actually improved function in the linked study, reduced pain in people with inflexible quads. It was as simple as that. All they had to do was just lengthen that muscle a little bit, give it a little bit of weekly love, daily love, whatever it may be. Issue resolved. Tight hip flexors, even tight glutes, can lead to low back problems. Tight glute, especially your glute max, can manifest as sciatic issues. And I bring this one up because it's especially on my mind recently, because I'm seeing a sports therapist I went in and, she asked me the laundry list of issues with my body, previous issues, current, what I do. And I said, I'm having sciatic issues, and I don't know if there's much to do about that. And she says, oh, I don't know that it's sciatic issues. Let's take a look at your glutes. Sure enough, I'm seeing relief from adjusting my glutes.
Wow.
Tight hamstrings, no, not news to anybody, lead to low back pain, knee pain, interestingly, even foot pain. And then move on to the upper body. If you have tight lats, and this is what explained my shoulder restriction, tight lats of all things, a big muscle on your back was causing my shoulder, I couldn't bring my arm above my body, out in front of my body because of something that was going on behind my body. Tight upper back, obviously, can lead to neck issue. And then tight scapulae. So your shoulder blades. This can actually lead to shoulder issues galore. And what's interesting is I found out that all this is about me right now, that my scapulae, my shoulder blades were tacked down. I mean, this is the opposite of mobile, right? What had happened, I basically cultivated my own muscle imbalance by not recognizing the benefit of a fuller scapular range of motion. Back and down, back and down. That's all you hear. That's all I told as a personal trainer, never recognizing that pretty much every exercise can be changed in such a way that you actually protract your scapulae also. Let those shoulder blades move their full range of motion so that you don't over time restrict that motion. And as cyclists and as people sitting in cars, I mean, that position, we sit in a protracted position. So my consciousness was always on keeping it retracted so that I don't develop those other compensations when I was just reinforcing the opposite compensation.
Motion is lotion. But yeah, the scapulae are really important. And those and having less mobility in your scapulae can affect rib mobility, which can affect breathing mobility as well. So all of these things are connected and pretty vital.
One thing, if I could add another reason that cyclists should, this whole question, should cyclists stretch at all? There's an inherent risk that we should all choose to own if we are going to continue cycling in crashing. And typically in crashing or something like that, what happens is that we are forced to explore ranges of motion that we don't typically explore. And that's when a lot of injuries happen, right? So that either looks like when you pull a groin or even a lot of collarbone breaks. It could very well be exacerbated by a lack of mobility that a person has. This is really common. Shoulder injuries, it's like galore. Knee issues, same thing. If you are not to the point where like Chad's talking about this range of motion where within we pedal, and that's what we explore, and we do that repeatedly, and we have to be able to be good at that. But then if you are a cyclist, particularly one, if you're cyclocross, mountain biking, anything off-road, or crit racing, because you crash just as much as an off-roader, anything with that, you have to know that occasionally you're going to be pushed out of that range, and you have to be able to take that. We've talked about before how it's such a shame when you see Grand Tour cyclists Pro Tour cyclists, and when they fall over, they're out for weeks, right? For one reason or another. And this is the sort of thing that you just have to account for as well. Not only will it make you a more durable cyclist, but it just makes you a more healthy human. And that's really an important thing. If you are not a healthy human, it's tough to get faster. We can't just become such a narrowly focused tool. So yes, you should stretch and do all that to be able to be effective at riding your bike, but you should also be prepared for the rainy days, so to speak. And mobility is a great way to be able to do that. Chad, do you have anything else to add on that before we talk about like how flexible do I need to be? Because that's the tricky part is if we talk to somebody in a different sport, or if we look to something, like Instagram or something else or TikTok, we see people that are insanely flexible. And suddenly the definition of flexible is redefined when we see that. And we wonder if we're flexible enough.
I think our flexibility needs as cyclists is super narrow. So rather, I'd like to look at the benefits of stretching, just be a bit more broad about this.
Yeah, please.
And I guess we could really phrase it as, or ask ourselves, why do athletes stretch? Why do we floss? Why do we roll? And I want to just focus on the big three. I have others, and I'll get to them relative to another question. But let's look at the top three that are most often cited. The first of which is injury prevention. And I'm here to tell you that no research reliably links stretching with injury reductions. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. Maybe the studies weren't formulated well. Maybe it didn't have a big enough subset of folks, whatever.
Imagine being in that study. Like, now we're going to injure you.
Okay, so that's one limitation. That's one issue they're going to face. But there's also just the idea that it's too hard to control. I mean, you can have athletes do a particular thing for a particular length of time, and if they get injured, did it come down to the fact that they didn't stretch, or the myriad other things that might have caused the injury? So it's just too tough a thing to measure.
Big enough population over time. I mean, if there was a strong signal, you would see it.
over time.
Like,
It would have to be a really
Yeah.
elaborate observational. You'd have to go back so far, and
I think
it could be
I don't
done.
know. This is
It could be done.
this is I talk about. I don't even talk about this. My sister is like a PhD, Johns Hopkins public health one of the top researchers in the world for tobacco. But that's an example of they take people who smoke and people who don't. People who smoke get cancer. People who don't, right? And if it was impactful, like as much as that, people who stretch, people who don't, you would see it all the time. People who don't stretch get injured, and at like a much higher rate. So if it's really small like that, and you can't do what John says, design a study where you're going to get some kind of injury inside of it. You got to look at populations over time, and because there's such variability in the reason why someone gets injured, I'm guessing the reason is there's not enough like oomph to that factor to get it out of there. That's what I think, or it could be designed. I'm not really into the research, but that's what I'm thinking is the reason why it is. And that doesn't mean though that there's not impact, which just means it's not detectable at that level.
That's the tricky
really
part about studies.
Solid observation.
Yeah, it's hard to observe those sort of impacts that could be absolutely real and beneficial for an athlete, but it can be hard to observe those when you're looking at various different people or even large scales like that. And it's like, imagine putting together some sort of study or review where you have enough size to be able to pick up on that too. It's all just really complicated. It's not as simple as we think of like, oh, I stretch, now I'm not injured and mark that down. So anecdote doesn't equal it. Sorry, Chen.
But that's okay. Well, still on the topic of injury prevention as being, one of the reasons why we should stretch. My favorite blog phrase, and I'm sorry, but blogs these days, period, they're just rife with,
except for trainerroad.com/blog.
Oh no,
that one's 100%.
Certain blogs are solid. Certain blogs are research, and certain blogs don't do what I'm just about to describe. Basically, my phrase of the day is research shows. That's been my phrase of the last several years. Research shows. And then it just gives you something and you're just supposed to buy it, swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. Scroll down, there's no links, there's no citations. And often enough, there's products or services to be purchased at the end of all of this. So, and it doesn't mean the stuff isn't true. It just means, if you're going to tout this, can you at least cite it? Can you give us some evidence of the fact that this is true, that there's some evidence that supports it? But based on everything I've read, injury prevention is simply a boat that won't float. Okay, that's not the best reason for us to get behind adding stretching to our regimen. Then, amongst the big three, let's get to the second one: improve performance. I looked at a systematic review. Looked at 28 studies, and they looked at improving muscle performance. And they did jumping, sprinting, different types of contractions. What they find: chronic stretching doesn't affect muscle performance in half the studies. Chronic stretching increases muscle performance in the other half of the studies. Chronic stretching decreases muscle performance in none of the studies. Okay. So it may help, it may not, but it doesn't hurt. So in terms of improved performance, you at least know that you're not going to damage your performance by adding mobility to it. So there's nothing really to lose by trying it except for the time commitment and perhaps opportunity costs, which we'll discuss in a bit. And then also another study looked at dynamic stretching, the benefits of which actually counteracted its own concurrent effects. So the muscle tendon stretching that we look for when we stretch was countered by the muscle, or it countered the muscle warm-up effects. So on the positive, we got a warm-up. On the negative, the muscle stretching had a negative impact. So even within dynamic stretching, there's no way, you can't just close book, say dynamic stretching works, let's get after it. And this line of research actually led me to a really interesting article where the author suggested that we retire flexibility as a major component of physical fitness. This was just done a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, this ought to be good. But I read it, and there's a lot of solid support because he recognized that there was little predictive utility with the big flexibility in general. And it's not a stretching contest, right? I mean, we're not looking for who has the most flexibility. We're looking for who's the best athlete. Does flexibility predict that? Yeah, show me evidence. His point was that time is better spent on other things like managing your body composition, cardiovascular fitness, muscle strength and endurance, and all things that are related to better health and performance benefits. He also pointed out the flexibility and mobility can be achieved indirectly through, and he noted strength training. And I had already come across a linked study that strength training versus stretching for improving range of motion. This was another review just last year. looked at 11 randomized controlled trials. They had 452 participants. And what did they note? But improved range of motion was similar between strength training and flexibility training. So,
Cool.
and there is a caveat that most of these studies did look at the hamstrings, but still it's a muscle, and strength training brought about the same level of flexibility, mobility as did dedicated mobility, flexibility training. And then when it comes to specifically strength performance, we don't even need to get into that. I linked to a single study that is representative of many studies that provide much support for the negative outcomes that are associated with stretching just prior to strength training. And yes, this is just prior. We'll elaborate on different timing later. With endurance training, there's nothing in direct support for improved performance, but indirectly, I mean, anything that facilitates our return to training is going to increase our training consistency and our adherence, and eventually could, in fact, manifest in improved performance. So while it doesn't directly happen, it could indirectly over time happen. So I don't want to say it can affect endurance performance, but I couldn't find any science to directly say stretch and your endurance performance will improve.
Should we stretch or nah?
Yeah, because there are other reasons. And the first of which is the third reason in the oft-cited reasons for stretching is increased range of motion. Okay, that's typically what we're after when we stretch, right? So if we know that improved performance, probably not likely. Injury prevention, well, it's just nothing that really supports it. Increased range of motion, tons of support for this. So the results of acute stretching or rolling are transient and short-lived, right? So anything you do on the roller or on the ground or however you go about it, you're probably going to see effects that last on the high end about 30 minutes. So the takeaway is that there has to be some level of consistency if you want to sustain these changes. You can't just do it, call it good, and expect to be flexible forever. So in line with this, my recommendations are to roll this into a warm-up or a cool down, or set aside a usual time such that you do it with a high level of consistency. And there's benefits to be had with just about timing at just about any time. Immediately post-workout does carry with it the benefit of elevated tissue temperature and greater blood flow, because you're just coming off of a workout, your muscles are charged, so to speak. Post-workout, I mean, you can do it right after the workout. I linked to a paper that showed benefits of doing it 24 hours all the way up to 96 hours post-workout. So it doesn't, you don't have to stretch immediately post. You don't have to even do it the next day, as long as you're getting it in there somewhere. Well, benefits have demonstrated themselves. Foam rolling might actually be the best solution when it comes to quad and hamstring flexibility, which is obviously relevant to us as endurance athletes, cyclists especially. And I linked to a study that looked at 15 male, 15 female college kids. They did dynamic stretching, static stretching, foam rolling. They did all of them in random order on 3 separate days, separated by 42 to 72 hours. So no carryover effects. And what did they find is that there was greater flexibility was achieved in the foam rolling intervention. So takeaway here is that range of motion increases, or could be that range of motion increases are probably the number one reason to engage in mobility training. Sorry.
Possibly flexibility. Yeah. So this resonates with me after coming back from my injury. I had and actually it's on the forum. Go to TrainerRoad.com/forum. And if you look up knee injuries, we'll post the link into the chat right now on YouTube as well. If you look up knee injuries, you'll see it. And I had a whole routine that I would go through. It's a mix of mobility work and then also just some basic, like simple strength exercises. But when doing those regularly, those are like a great fix, Chad, or a great systems check for me to be able to know how I was doing and if I was ready to actually train. Because I was dealing with a severe knee injury. It was keeping me off the bike, excruciating pain. Sure. And this was years, and it was really difficult. So if I went out to go do a training ride, which once again, such a huge fan of the trainer in particular for many reasons, but this is a great reason. If you go and do a ride and you get halfway out on a loop, but you're experiencing pain, you have to ride back and then possibly push through pain even more. Whereas when I was on the trainer, I could just stop as soon as if I felt pain while I was rehabbing this injury and coming through. Once again, totally different goal than getting faster necessarily, even though that was the way to get faster. I was just trying to get my body to work well. And when I was able to do this normal routine with consistency, I was able to see hey, I'm not where I need to be in terms of hip internal rotation or whatever the main thing that I was working on. I'm not where I need to be on that right now. So I'm not going to do a big, long workout. I'm going to do something small. I might not do anything at all. So it's like part of this too. And you have this routine, like you're talking about, Chad, it's a really good way for you to keep tabs on how your body is doing. And whether it comes from injury or whether it comes from lack of maintenance, do something consistently so you don't have to worry about the lack of maintenance. And then you can find out whether it's, you're ready to go or not. So coming back from injury, once again, this is an edge case. We're not just talking about average cyclists, but coming back from injury, that really resonates with me. And it's a very valuable thing, or was for me. Chad, you mentioned foam rolling. Do foam rolling and stretching, you've mentioned the fact that range of motion was better in that study of athletes when they were foam rolling versus I think it was dynamic versus static. But do they accomplish the same thing? Should you be doing both of those things, or can you do either or? Because once again, it's like a time thing. Like if I'm going to be doing mobility work, flexibility work, foam rolling work, and all the other many different things that I could do, I could spend hours doing that. And I might be better suited just spending hours training and getting faster.
Right.
So,
and see, that was a comparison between all the different types, or a few different types of stretching. And they're looking at the hams and the quad strings in youngsters. I don't think they were athletes. They might've been untrained, but it does further the point that I'd like to make. And in order to do that, let's just do a quick 10,000 foot view of what stretching is. I don't intend to make this a kinesiology lesson. I don't think that information is going to really make anybody faster. So I'm going to keep this super simple and just say that muscles contain basically a receptor called the muscle spindle, and that conveys the appropriate muscle length to the brain. Okay. So if you stretch, if the muscle becomes too long, if it becomes long too quickly, if it becomes too long too quickly, there's a involuntary contraction termed the stretch reflex. Okay. And stretching can affect this reflex both positively and negatively. So stretching directly targets the muscle tendon unit. So when we talk about stretching, static stretching, passive stretching, dynamic stretching, that's what we're targeting, right? So this in turn can increase the range of motion. And again, it's transient, 30 minutes at the high end, but other methods, especially if you perform them with regularity, can carry lasting effects, even if they're achieved via different effects, different responses. So the point is that stretching the muscle tendon unit isn't the only way to improve your mobility. Stretching comes in many forms, and these many forms, however you do it, can positively affect our mobility. It can help us access each joint's range of motion. And it doesn't matter if it's done via stretching, whether it's static or dynamic or passive, whether it's done via tissue manipulation, which is the rolling and also the flossing that we'll touch on. So my point here is simply don't get hung up on the stretching modality. Just do something. Find one of them that works for you. Find whatever combination of them works for you. Find the things that address your specific limitations.
So rolling, I guess one way to think of it, stretching just pulls on the muscle, whereas rolling actually could work on the muscle all along every inch of it, right, Chad? And being a pretty big differentiation between the two.
Yeah. So this, I just saw as kind of an opportunity to talk about the various forms of stretching. We kind of already talked on them, or I did, but let's just define them in case anyone isn't clear. And I don't expect everyone's up on all these terms. So I'll quickly lay them out. Static stretching is basically the bane of everyone's existence who doesn't understand the actual benefits of stretching, right? This is the one that'll negatively impact performance, so we shouldn't do it. This, and we'll talk about that, but this is holding the position at the end of your range of motion. So you go as far as you can stretch and you sit there. So good examples of this would be the couch stretch that we've promoted in the past, the pigeon stretch, which is where you get those deep hip muscles by putting your foot up in front of you on like a plyo box, knee out to the side and leaning into it. And then there's dynamic stretching, and this is moving in and out of your ends of range of motion. So you don't hold it at any point. You simply move to one end of it and come back to the other end of it. And examples of this would be leg swings, especially good for cyclists, whether you recognize it or not. And then really simply jumping jacks. Jumping jacks are a good demonstration of dynamic stretching. And while we're on the topic of dynamic stretching, I did come across a study that looked at the speed of the dynamic stretching. And they compared 50 reps per minute versus 100 reps per minute. So just, the pace of it. It's not that they did it 50 or 100 times, but that speed. And they looked at strength, range of motion, muscle and tendon length, again, stretching's intended outcome. And what they noted was that slower worked better in all measures. So my takeaway here is simply that there's no need to get overly aggressive with your dynamic stretching. And I feel it necessary to bring this up because when you talk about leg swings and dynamic stretching, man, I've seen people do some outright dangerous stuff. So slow it down. It doesn't need to be explosive or out of control.
Yeah.
And there's also PNF, and it's proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, which is an assisted form of stretching, and that falls in line with all the passive stretching where you'll use like a towel or a band, gravity, another person. It will cover that another time if we cover it at all. And then foam rolling, and foam rolling is exactly what it sounds like. You're rolling your muscles over foam. Okay, so it's a foam roller. You roll
Hard foam.
Yeah,
well, it
sometimes
can
rubber.
be. It can be. And if all of the foam's hard to you, well, that's an indication that you should probably do a bit more rolling, because some of that foam is downright soft once your muscles are compliant and can actually handle it.
Mhm.
So the aim here is the release of fascial tissue, which is, we've talked about before, it's the connective tissue that surrounds and separates our muscles. And foam rolling addresses the condition of the tissue. So it's no longer the muscle tendon unit. Now it's the condition of the tissue itself. And think along the lines of adhesions, tissue stiffness, a term, thixotropic responses. This is basically the viscosity of the muscle itself, which sounds weird, but I saw it described as like squeezing a gel packet. At first, it's kind of solid. The more you squeeze it back and forth, it becomes less viscous. Same idea. Instead of a gel packet, we're talking about the fascia of the muscle, right? And then finally, tissue flossing. Only going to touch on this a little bit because frankly, I ran out of time, but it's kind of along those lines. You use compression via a floss band and movement of the joint to, and this is a quote from one of the papers I came across, to alter the relationship of the fascia with the neuromusculoskeletal system. So think about that. It's the fascia and how it relates to both your neural system, your muscle system, and your skeletal system. So we're just trying to change that relationship favorably a bit. And
Chad, can I visually explain what that looks like?
Sure.
It looks like wrapping a really tight band around a portion of your muscles, and then you move through the range of motion. And it's not very comfortable.
It can be really painful.
Yep. And basically what it does is, if you think of your muscles with the lining, it pinches that. So then it allows them to operate and to slide independently from each other. It forces that myofascial release in a different way. Instead of just mashing with a foam roller, it's squeezing it so much, but then still requiring the muscle to move, that it tears those binds and those adhesions that exist right there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then the single study that I linked to on tissue flossing did point out that it may trump dynamic stretching in some measures. So I think, and I'm not saying this is better than dynamic stretching. It's again, back to that same take home, pick one, pick all of them, vary them, do a little bit of whatever. All of them demonstrate efficacy, at least in some ways, if not a lot of the ways we're seeking.
So the answer, instead of doing all of them, the answer is to do what works best for you. Would that be a fair assumption when we going back to that question of, should I stretch as a cyclist, or should I foam roll, or should I do any of these things? You have to do what works. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into my next question, the next question, which is, what areas of flexibility should I focus on most? Which I kind of reframed as to what areas of flexibility actually limit your performance. What of them actually limit your day-to-day, just normal things outside of the performance realm. And I think the big question becomes, is mobility training necessary for athletes? And in my view, that's a hard yes. I think from the perspective of young athletes, you can maintain your existing mobility by establishing and then supporting, super important, proper movement patterns. Okay. So you don't allow the limitations to creep into your scenario and eventually become compensations, and then have those compensations down the road translate into greater issues. So to put it another way, it's prehabilitation, and that's a kind of a buzzy term. So let's just call it what it is. It's preemptive self-care. And recently, when I was with my sports therapist, she asked me, "What do you do in terms of self-care?" And I was stuck. I was like, I don't know what that means. And, I mean, it's
I can only imagine.
It's kind of in the term, right? Self-care. What do you do to care for yourself? And obviously she's talking in the context of body work. And I didn't have any good answers for her, except that I did a lot of things, but I didn't do any of them consistently.
You're like, I lift heavy, I pedal hard.
Yeah.
Live hard.
And I sometimes lay on a roller and writhe and cry and try to pretend I'm watching TV, even though I'm in so much pain, I can't process anything I'm seeing. So, but this is my point here, is that this is your opportunity as a youngster to establish the consistency that's going to serve you for a lifetime. Set those habits up now, because they will benefit you. Take it from an aging athlete, which brings us to aging athletes. This is an opportunity to fix issues rather than avoid them or accommodate them or tolerate them. it is surprisingly easy to work around movement limitations, to learn to live with them. And you can do it for long periods of time. What am I describing there but chronic pain? I mean, something that 1 out of 3 Americans and Brits, I think those were the statistics we looked at last time. Point is, a lot of people suffer from this. So it's my view that mobility training is a way for us to take ownership and affect control over these things. It's our opportunity to decide how we move, quite literally, through life, through training, through competition, through playtime with your friends and your family. And then we'll address this a little bit later, but it doesn't have to add significant time to your training. I do recognize that we're already busy with training. We're already busy with our life schedules. And I also acknowledge that there's a payoff versus opportunity cost scenario here. You know, the cost of something else, it's either going to come at the expense of something else if your time is super limited, or you're going to have to figure out how to economize, trim down those other things such that you can force this in here. But my belief is that young or old, some is always better than none. How much is needed, how much is actually beneficial is always contextual. So, you know, a young rider with no real limitations versus a battered veteran like me, I'm probably going to dedicate more time to this, and I need to, even if it comes at the expense of a little bit of time on the bike.
Yeah. And I want to, go ahead, Nate.
Aging or young? I don't.
Sorry, say that again, Nate.
Am I an aging athlete or a young athlete? Like,
You're on the cusp, buddy.
Welcome to the club. Because of Chad's saying.
I'm not going to be able to lift my coffee mug soon on my way to 140.
It was temporary.
Look, Chad,
I'm super good now.
I'm still young.
Check out that shoulder mobility. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I haven't even rolled my last today.
The point about chronic pain is really important. And I want to also emphasize that could also be just chronic discomfort. I think a lot of athletes get really good at pushing through and tolerating pain and discomfort to a point where, for those of us who are experienced in training, we kind of have this default mode of just push through and override those sensations. And so we're at a higher risk of putting up with and tolerating a lot of discomfort that you don't necessarily need to. So just because you're not experiencing what you might define as chronic pain, you might be just, experiencing some chronic discomfort that frankly is just a huge energy drain. I mean, if you think about doing a time trial, for example, the minor discomfort, or maybe not so minor discomfort, that you feel from the saddle is such a massive distraction and such a huge energy drain, as like a very simple, straightforward analogy that a lot of people can identify with. But you just
don't tell me that's minor, Amber. That discomfort is real and major.
The discomfort, right? It's such a drain, and it drains everything. And Chad mentioned this earlier in this conversation, but I mean, what that does to your motivation and your ability to engage with life in general, let alone your training. I mean, it's huge. So I would challenge everybody who's listening to this. You might think, chronic pain, whatever, I'm not there yet, but you might have some minor discomforts that become white noise to you over time that might be affecting you more than you think.
That's a really good point. You can suss that out via a single massage. I mean, think of you go in, you see a massage therapist, and maybe it's a rarity or it's your first time even, and you come away thinking, oh my God, I feel so much better. And you do small things where you realize, oh, I don't have that pain or that restriction, or, oh, it used to be hard or painful to do that, and it isn't now. So, and it's kind of a wake up call to how much pain you've actually just kind of stuffed and you move past, don't acknowledge.
I can't tell you how many times I've said to my massage therapist, I didn't realize how much tension I was carrying until it was gone. And then when it's gone, you're like, whoa, wow. That was just building up over time. And I was just tolerating, accommodating. Yeah. And that brings up another point. Just, this is just anecdote, but I was working with a bodywork professional, and, I not jokingly said something like, oh, I had this pain. It came out of nowhere. It was all of a sudden. And he just laughed, and he's like, that's what everybody says. This came out of nowhere. It was all of a sudden. And he said, but really what's been happening is your body has been accommodating and compensating for a really long time. But because you were able to compensate and just push through or tolerate, you didn't notice until the whole system broke down. So it's very rare that these things come out of nowhere. And to your point, being aware of the discomfort earlier on in that kind of accommodation pathway, right, might be very beneficial.
It's kind of like your body's codependent, and it's like compensating. And it's like, I'm tired of this. The resentment goes up, and then they just blows up. And you're like, well, I didn't even know. Like, you should have told me. This came out of nowhere. It's been years. They've been putting up.
Your
with
body's
you,
like,
Amber.
I've been telling you.
Yeah. No, they haven't been telling you. They've been thinking it. They're just, that's the codependent part. It's in their head. They're like, why didn't you know this? And they all gave up at once.
Chad, the question needs to be asked. Is being too flexible bad for me as a cyclist? There's a whole lot of non-scientific narrative around this where it's like, I've heard this before, where whether it's you stretch too much and you become less powerful or you become less fit for one reason or another. I've heard this narrative. I don't know if there's any science behind that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this probably stems from static stretching's bad rap. So I kind of want to look at it from that perspective first, and then I have a couple other little points to make. So I think the question then becomes, does static stretching's bad rap apply to endurance athletes? I mean, we know it clearly affects strength athletes. Does it affect us? And what is that bad rap? Is that acutely? So when we're talking the severe sudden response, the stuff that happens immediately, static stretching can reduce force capabilities, and this reduces that elastic response, that stretch reflex I talked about earlier. And this is especially relevant in strength sports, in sprinting, etc. My question is, how important is this downside, this so-called downside to most of us? I mean, I do recognize that someone, a track sprinter in particular, this is probably pretty relevant, right? The last thing they want to do is hold a long static stretch and then hop on the bike and try to do a standing start and bury themselves for a lap. But them aside, ours is a sport of largely concentric only contractions, right? So we only have the muscle. Amber, do you want to take this? I know you're going to cover the concentric eccentric topic. Oh, so really, it's quite simple.
Yeah. Concentric is where you're contracting the muscle and the muscle is shortening. And then there's also another form of muscle contraction where you can be contracting the muscle as it's lengthening. So one way of thinking about this is, as you're walking downstairs, your quadriceps muscle is actually lengthening, even though you're contracting it. Whereas if you're trying to do a leg extension on a leg extension machine, for example, you're contracting that quad at the same time as it's shortening. So it's a very different sensation and a very different effect on the muscle itself.
Right. And as you vacillate between that lengthening and shortening, that's where the elastic component comes into all of this. And so my question is, with us only really exhibiting or performing concentric only contractions, does that elastic component play any part of that next contraction? I mean, we shut off for long enough that it's hard for me to imagine, and there probably is research on this. Sorry, I didn't find it. That says, it's turned off long enough that the elastic response is dead in the water and we don't really benefit from it. And that wouldn't surprise me at all. So where would the decreases in muscle elasticity actually harm our performance as endurance athletes?
Interesting perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way.
And we do know with running, I mean, as far back as 2009 and probably farther back than that, and I linked one study that where static stretching does raise energy costs, and in this case of the endurance running itself. But running relies on a stretch reflex. It has an eccentric component. Muscle stiffness is a big concern with runners, not so much with riders.
And if I could pitch kind of like the other side of the coin here, if you get injured, then you can't train at all. And who cares about the minimal energy cost that you had, right? Like we're kind of talking about this, sorry, what? Say that again, Nate.
But it doesn't prevent injury.
Well, but it very well,
not enough to.
It very well could. If you're very not mobile and then you are exploring ranges of motion that you are not familiar with and you're doing so repeatedly, that's likely going to cause some sort of injury, right? So, because there's this temptation to do extremes, right? It's either look at the evidence and say, well, a study hasn't proven that there's no injury, so I am going to completely ignore any personal signs and signals that I have, and I'm going to not stretch because it could harm that, and it could make it more energy or costly from an energy perspective to move. Or you can look at it like, well, it's probably good to do some maintenance and to make sure that my body can just perform well within this range of motion. And if that's the case, once again, I'm just looking at it in a vacuum here. If you're worried about losing a small amount of efficiency when you're operating and then compound that over a month of training, or just missing that month of training because you're injured, you can't just completely lose focus here and pick one side or the other. That's why.
Yeah. Specific, I know I hear your point generalized, like if you don't do this, you could lose out way more on the other side. So many things in life like that. Generally in running, how this is more, I have a study to back this up, but I think it's more like the mix of it though. It's technique, like for list of injury, technique first, then it's usually like some type of muscle imbalance, like weak glute medius or something inside of that. And actually maybe even before that is volume and intensity and like how you space your running. And then probably mobility is probably pretty far down. And a lot of times with technique, especially for new runners, it's going to be actually less mobility. It's like shorter steps because you're doing these huge bound strides and you're bam, bam, bam every time. So although that is in the list of things for running and your point totally stands, if I was a runner, if I was a runner again, I would probably put more effort into other preventative things just for your point first, and then work down the pyramid to that to see if there's really an issue with that. And there are definitely people who do have that issue, and there's something that is tight and they fix that and they don't have the IT band issue. Like their IT band being tight being one of them. Mine would get really angry when I would do too much volume, and I would physically like release it with my fingers and it relax and I could run again. It was crazy.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to avoid is a person listening to this and being like, stretching will make me slower. I'm never going to stretch. And if anything forces me into any sort of a stretch, I'm going to avoid it because it will make me slower. Don't do that. Like, don't just go from one side to the other like that.
Wearing a helmet might slow you down on a climb.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yep.
Not much, but it might. And so I'm not going to wear a helmet, but then
what really makes you slow is when you crash and you don't have a helmet. That makes you real slow. So
real slow forever. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all about priorities. Like we can't lose perspective on what really matters here. But Chad, really interesting point on the eccentric and concentric contractions and how static stretching actually affects that. That was a very measured approach of looking at that.
That is, specific to static stretching, but there's even, if we're going to poke holes, let's look at dynamic stretching too, because, this is an argument that I could see cited, and this is a study and there is support for this, that this one in particular, look at knee flexion, peak torque, and how it decreases with the dynamic stretching warm-up. Okay. So now people are going to think, oh, I can't do dynamic either because that actually decreases my peak torque, but we're endurance athletes. I mean, how often does peak torque actually limit us as an endurance athlete? Again, maybe if you're a track sprinter and you have to take off and you need that peak torque for the initial boom, 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 getting the wheel up to speed, maybe that's a concern. For most of us, I don't think it is. And then even for those track sprinters, the science supports that if you static stretch, as long as you keep those stretches short, and short in this case was under 20 seconds, which I still consider a reasonably long stretch, low in intensity.
Long enough when you're in holding that stretch, that's for sure.
for sure. But low in intensity. So not so much, because the idea here is to keep it, and they use very commonly the Likert scale, the 1 to 10 scale. So 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being intense pain, 1 being 0 pain. And then you can follow it and basically ameliorate all the harmful effects of static stretching as long as you do a little bit of dynamic stretching, a little bit of movement specific to what you're going to do. There's also a study that I linked to that shows that even if you can follow 30 seconds of static stretching, so a good long hold with a single 3-second max isometric contraction. So just think of straightening your leg out, squeezing your quad as hard as you can for 3 seconds, boom, washes away all the so-called damage that the static stretching could have wrought. Okay. At least that single study says so, but it was backed up quite well. So the point is that if static stretching is or must remain a part of your warm-up routine, do it. And I say this because I'm highly in favor, very strongly in favor of retaining the comfort of a familiar protocol. I recognize the psychological benefits in this, and I've linked to a study that does too. They looked at 5 seconds of static stretching versus 3 by 10 seconds of static stretching versus dynamic stretching versus no stretch warm-up. And what they found was there's no difference in flexibility, no difference in physical function, but the participants felt more likely to perform well. So it affected their psychological state because they got to do something that was familiar, something that made them think, okay, now I'm ready to get this done. This is what I've always done. This puts me in the right frame of mind. This makes me think I'm taking care of my body, prepping myself for the work ahead, avoiding injury, improving performance, all the things that may not be true, but if they believe it's true, certainly powerful. So my recommendation. Yeah.
Sorry, Chad, please.
Yeah. So my recommendation, and this is based on papers, recommendations, is it whether it's foam rolling or static stretching, simply follow it with some workout specific dynamic stretching. So for cyclists, this would be leg swings or brief quad stretches or heel grabs. Don't hold them, just move through them. And you can achieve the range of motion improvements and avoid that whole stretch reflex decrease that could come with the static stretching.
So what I'm gathering so far is that there's a whole lot of like absolute theories that get put out there, like do not stretch or absolutely stretch or do one thing or the other. And what I'm gathering so far is that any sort of absolute approach like that and a hard and fast rule is likely to be or should be ignored. And instead, you should look at this pragmatically, personally, find what works best for you, and utilize the range to be able to be sufficiently mobile. The one thing that we haven't covered is the original point that Nate brought up was timing when Nate was being physically stopped in the pool to continue swimming. I've heard a lot of people say that you stretch after, you do not stretch before, or if you do stretch before, you have to do a warm up and then you have to stretch. So what about timing, Chad?
Yeah, so this kind of brings us to some of the other claimed benefits of mobility training, stretch training, whatever you want to call it. And one of them is to attenuate or reduce set to set performance. So the decline in set to set performance. And it's often referred to as interset or within workout stretching. Should I stop mid workout? And this is especially applicable to strength training because you got time between sets, right? You're sitting and resting. Maybe you can do some stretching. Doesn't apply as well to endurance training, but I can imagine it being worth a shot. I mean, something that anyone could apply if they wanted to. One study looked at agonist antagonist rolling, and basically they're looking at the quadriceps, right? So if they were rolling the agonist, they were rolling the quads. If they were rolling the antagonist, they were rolling the hamstrings. If they were doing a combination of the two, they were spending half time on one, half time on the other. And then I think there was a control as well. And they did this during the 2 minutes of rest. And then, so the one group did actually rest for those 2 minutes, and then there were the 3 other interventions. And with strength training, yes, but again, these are leg extensions, and they were done to exhaustion. So this is strength training, but it's not closely akin to endurance training, but it's at least along those lines because they did 3 sets at 10 RM to exhaustion. So they pushed to the point of exhaustion. And what they found was that whether they stretched the agonist, the antagonist, or both, or neither, it increased their training volume. And in doing so, and this was a criticism, increase their fatigue. But if the volume goes up, you would expect the fatigue to go up. So I don't think that's a valid criticism. But in all cases, it reduced the perception of muscle soreness. And regarding muscle soreness, this is something that's perhaps centrally mediated. So put another way, it's something that's probably stimulated by central brain modulators, right? So this is like not in the muscle, this is actually in the brain. And along these lines, I came across a study where they looked at people who would hold a stretch or accumulate 240 seconds of stretching or more. So we're talking more than 4 minutes. And what was interesting about this is they saw a large increase in non-local range of motion. So they could stretch one muscle and then experience greater range of motion in other muscles across the body. And this just drives home the point that peripherally, muscle tendon stiffness is what you try to address, but globally, there might be some neurological benefit. Honestly, I'm not sure it matters. I mean, it's super cool, but so what? If it results in less post-workout discomfort, it's a win.
Right.
And then with this set to set performance rolling in between, it's not the most consistent findings. The study that I just talked about a little bit earlier was the one on the positive side of things, but against it were 4 negative ones and 1 no difference. And yes, they were all strength training routines, I'm pretty sure, or studies, but it's a bit wishy-washy. And as far as the endurance training application, I'm not sure one exists, but I don't see the harm in trying it. I mean, if you're doing, say, a 5x3 VO2 max workout with 3-minute recoveries in between, why not hop off the bike, roll your muscles for 30 seconds per agonist, antagonist, whatever, get back on the bike and see how it affects your performance. I mean, it's become pretty clear there's not a heck of a lot of harm in it. This is foam rolling. We're not talking about sitting in a 30-second static stretch the entire time. So I honestly think it's probably worth a go.
That's an interesting concept. So in terms of stretching beforehand, stretching during, or stretching after, is there a specific recommendation, Chad?
Yeah. So let me give me a minute to pull my notes here. So the next question, or I guess it says, should we stop after our warm up and stretch? And that's basically what I just described. What I did skip over is before or after training. So, and this brings us to yet another short list, I promise, of some of the touted benefits of stretching. And one of them, and one that actually does hold some scientific evidence, is to reduce muscle soreness and increase or reduce pain. In support of this, a meta that looked at 14 studies where they rolled before, 7 studies where they rolled after, and they got a minor reduction in muscle pain perception when done post. So, and that's interesting across a number of studies, but the consensus across so many related studies is that there is a potential for minor reductions in pain perception. On top of that, no harmful effects in this regard. So it never increased pain perception. So again, it doesn't hurt, it may benefit. The takeaway from this and related studies was that 2 to 4 sets, 30 to 60 seconds of rolling per muscle group. And really, if you want to simplify it, it's just accumulate 120 seconds of rolling per muscle group per session. Seem to be the way to reduce pain perception. And then while we're on the topic of rolling, I don't know if this is a question that was directly asked, but I think maybe Zach asked, is the intensity of the rolling. And the consensus is that you kind of have to balance the pain rating with the roll time. So, how long it takes you to roll top muscle down to the bottom of the muscle. You're going to do it rapidly if it's very painful. You can take a little more time if it's not quite painful. So the two high pain levels are going to limit the duration of each of the directional rolls. So the recommendation is if you're going to go slow, keep it more the lower end of the spectrum. Maybe a 4 of a 10 on that Likert scale. And then with high pain, which gets the job done quicker, you push it up to the higher end. But I didn't see anything that recommended anything higher than a 7 out of a 10 or a 7 on a 1 to 10 scale. So it was never excruciating pain as much as you can stand, get it done, make it brutally painful. It was high discomfort for sure, but tolerable nonetheless. And it was noted that high pain seemed to be best reserved for post-workout when muscle performance and fascial tension is less of a concern. Because with the lower or interset, there is a possibility that you can negatively impact performance. So why take that chance? Keep the intensity a little bit lower.
There's admittedly a little bit of irony here that that you have to do something really painful in order to reduce your pain perception.
That's what my sports therapist keeps reminding me. She's telling me there will come a time where you will maybe actually fall asleep during one of these massages, and it's unimaginable. I'm scooting off the table. I don't know how many times a session. It's so painful, but it's actually changing my body. So it's
so
worthwhile.
To recap on this one, Chad, and to keep this one tight, it's beforehand. If you're going, so stretching beforehand or stretching after, it's okay either way. But stretching beforehand, you want to make sure that you are doing it harder or not too hard.
Now, stretching beforehand seems to lean toward the lower end of the pain scale.
And then stretching after is okay to go
a
deeper.
bit more abuse because you're not worried about hampering performance. Rather, you're looking for the benefits of the stretching.
Awesome. Cool.
Pain reduction. Yeah. So,
Nate,
and then
did you, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought Nate was going to chime in on something. Do you have anything that you want to chime in on, Nate? It looked like you were going to share partway through.
I was just going to say that for stretching for me, when we talk about it, my Adderall has to work overtime because stretching is just not that interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, are we ready to go on? But I think you just summarized it all. Chad, you did a great job just in general in the history of Nate. When all those people said, my PE teacher said to stretch, I did not stretch. I just kind of he's like deeper. I'm like, I don't care. I can't touch my toes. But it is a huge issue for a lot of people. And I think in the chat too, people are saying they like it a lot too. They keep discussing things.
For sure.
Chad, I did not say anything bad. I feel like I've just attacked you on your hard work on this. This is totally a me thing, not a you thing.
Yeah. No. I didn't take it as direct criticism.
Chad, any final notes on it that we want to cover?
Yeah, I guess we can cover the last couple.
The benchmarks
purported
question?
benefits. Well, no, a few more purported benefits of adding mobility training, and one is that it reduces muscle damage. And there was another review looked at 32 studies, and they used foam rolling again to significantly attenuate an increase in the markers of muscle damage. So basically, they reduced the markers of muscle damage, rolling immediately after the workout, as well as up to 48 hours post. So a little bit of support for getting it done after, in terms of trying to reduce the amount of muscle damage that takes place, which, again, leads to those things we pursue, a quicker return to training, which leads to greater consistency, which leads to greater gains, et cetera. And also in that Skinner review, they noted that with the foam rolling, there was an increase in the range of motion, no negative performance impacts, no gender differences, and again, no direct link to improved athletic performance. And then one little bit of support for pre-training stretching is that it does raise muscle temperature and increase blood flow. And there's no real argument across this. I did link to a study that supports it, but that's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if you're working the muscle, well, it's going to get increased blood flow. With that blood flow, you're going to get increased temperature. Pretty straightforward. And then mid-workout, mid-ride, this isn't exactly what I was talking about with the interset. It's rather a no research necessary reply. And that if at some point you have to counter the effects of long durations in a very fixed position. And sometimes you have this luxury, sometimes you can do it. I'm thinking training rides, casual rides, that sort of thing. And sometimes you just have to tolerate it. But there are dynamic on the bike examples. I mean, you can do, even if it's just taking your leg out of the pedal and flopping it around a bit, flexing your knee and going through, there are things, sitting up tall and letting your leg dangle so you open up your hips a little bit, take some pressure off your low back. All sorts of roadside and trailside opportunities where if you have the opportunity, the option of getting off and addressing it then and there, even, I dare say in like a multi-ride event where you're out there for 4, 5, 6 hours, were you to take a minute every 2 or 3 hours just to deal with some of the growing pain, would that benefit your performance in the next couple 3 hours to the tune of a minute? I have to think it would.
Yeah, it's also time for snacks. Just putting that out there.
Exactly. And just a break from it, right?
No doubt.
If your scenario accommodates it. And then finally, there's what I term the no kidding claim. If you reduce recovery time, then your return to training is improved. That's just how it works. So it's a typical result. The soreness goes down, muscle damage goes down, pain goes down. All these things facilitate a more rapid return to training. So pretty hard to argue that one.
So stretching recap, does it make you a faster cyclist? It could, if injury is inhibiting you, or if any sort of range of motion is inhibiting you from riding well. It could also take away from training time if you spend too much time doing it. There's no point in spending too much time doing it. You can stretch before, you can stretch during, you can stretch after. Just do what feels good and don't be afraid to use a variety of different tools. Does that recap it well, Chad?
Sounds pretty good. Yes.
Awesome.
Can I just make a couple quick comments on the psychological side of things here?
Sure.
And I won't take too much time, but we talked briefly about placebo. And having stretching or foam rolling being a part of your routine and kind of putting you into a good mental state. I just want to step back for a second and mention that, putting yourself in an ideal emotional state for performance is not just about placebo. Like there is definitely a real benefit to being in a primed emotional state, whatever that happens to be for you. And it's different for different people. But having a routine, and if stretching or foam rolling is a part of that, that puts you in a confident state of mind or an engaged, excited state of mind versus, a reluctant state of mind. That's a huge, that has huge impact and implications for performing, whether it's a training ride or a race. And the other thing I want to just mention is, in terms of timing this and integrating this with training, so you're not just adding one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. This is all stuff that you can do at the same time as other things. So I really liked when I was training really consistently, having a transition period after a really hard training ride to transition from sympathetic into parasympathetic, and having a stretching routine and doing some foam rolling was actually a really nice way for me to build that in. So it's kind of like, it's just a calm, block of time that doesn't have to take a lot of time, but listening to music, just watching a funny TV show, something like that. It's just a time to kind of check out and kind of bring your body, like your autonomic nervous system, kind of down a notch and transition into that parasympathetic. So there is a psychological component to this too that could be additionally beneficial, so that you're actually kind of hitting a lot of potentially helpful things that will enhance your training that don't necessarily have just to do with stretching.
Great points. Tristan, his question, he says, this summer I'll be doing races in the Cane Creek Cup in North Carolina. I'm moving there for an internship, so these will be entirely new races to me. I raced in high school in the Colorado NICA series, so I have a decent experience racing at altitude, but not much experience in the heat and humidity. I go to school in South Dakota at 3,500 feet, so once again, the temperature and humidity is very much on the moderate end. What can I do in South Dakota or Wyoming that would translate to help performance in the heat and humidity over the summer? And doing a 13 per hour per week plan indoors when weather is bad and outdoors when the weather permits. And he says, and hopefully whatever changes can fit within my engineering student schedule. Thanks. Nate, we did a Science of Getting Faster episode with Dr. Chris Minson, where we went over all the details of heat training. Tristan, you should listen to that. Absolutely. But Nate, what would you say to Tristan in this case? Probably not. I don't know if he has a sauna. I don't know what they have at their disposal. So
yeah, Tristan, and it sounds like Tristan might be, I'm guessing young, right? Internship out of high school, going to be a budget. Tristan, what I would do, you're 13 hours per week, indoors only. And I'm guessing then you're going to have some easier rides. I would start by adding on your easy rides, no fans, and see what happens. And you're going to start to sweat a whole bunch. I would do that until you don't have a huge probably heart rate response on those, or you feel more kind of normal on those rides. And then you can do it on a couple more. I'm going to do it for all your endurance rides because it does add recovery. Make sure you hydrate to it. The next step of that would be closer up to your race. I would say the 2 weeks leading up, you could increase the heat by like doing those trainer rides inside of a bathroom with like the shower on and stuff. The humidity doesn't, very surprised that when we saw, I think humidity did not increase it, but it does not make sense to me either. But you at least get the heat up there a lot hotter. You put a little, if you have a little space heater, you can put in there, but generally you can get these adaptations within 2 weeks if you're doing it like 4 times per week, but it's also going to help you by increasing plasma volume, even in cool conditions. So it's kind of a good thing for anyone to get into the process of. But on the other side of it, to John's point earlier, it adds stress, it adds RPE, it adds mental fatigue. And if that then prevents you from doing a hard workout, you're going to be slower anyways. So that's how I would do it. You could even, this is more of a mental toughness thing, but at the end, you could try doing maybe, I would say a workout, like a threshold workout, because that's really going to heat you up, or a sweet spot workout, but do maybe 1 point below your current progression level and try doing that in the heat. And it's going to be really, really tough and you might fail it, and that's okay. But just the idea of experience being hot, because have you guys had this too, where the first time you get hot, like you forget what it's like to be hot, and it's a different kind of uncomfortable, and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm cool with this. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with this. And then like, hey, I'm a dad. And then like maybe like 30 or an hour into the race, you're like, actually, I'm okay being hot. And your mind switches and you're like, this is the new normal. I'm in hell, kind of. I don't know. But that's how I would approach this. The way that if you have more money, you have a sauna, which I did, is you do your workouts and then afterwards you have your sauna pre-warmed up, you jump in there. I'll talk about something like Dr. Minson said, but then you jump in there and you're in there for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. You start sweating. After you do this for a little while, your sweat response happens way faster. It doesn't feel as hot. You notice the improvement. And again, that can happen over 2 weeks, but then when you stop, it tapers off really fast. And I think it's like 7 or 10 days, you're back to normal. Yeah. So, and Dr. Minson said too, in the infrared, to be in there while it heats up. In my experience with my own one, when I did that, I had no sweating, no heat for like 45 minutes until I got up to temperature. This might be a different kind of sauna, but I have I had one that was like a Costco infrared one that I just bought. I don't know if it was whatever.
Well, there was a recent paper surface that talked about maintenance of those adaptations too, where you said they dissipate pretty quickly, and they do, but you can maintain them with, I think it was, it might've been a single heat exposure over 7 days, maybe it was 4 days, but the frequency was quite a bit less. So we should try to dig that up.
Another really accessible way to do this, Tristan, is if you don't have a sauna. So actually, let me step back and run through a logic, kind of like a logic tree, if you will, with this. Let's say you do what Nate just talked about, by making your easier rides hot. So you don't use a fan, you do it in a warm room. And then let's say that you start to recognize that, actually now my key workouts the next day or a couple of days later are too hard to do. That in that case, that should be a clear sign that you should not be doing those easy rides in a hot state. Don't do that. Don't compromise the high quality work. Another way that you can do this is that after your workout, if you don't have a sauna, but you do have a bath, you can get a bath really hot. And I mean really hot, like uncomfortably hot. And then if you go into that bath and make sure you keep your hands and feet and other spots where you're most likely to vent heat, keep those underneath the water. That can do a great job of, because really the main aim is you're just trying to elevate core temperature and keep it elevated for a substantial period of time, relatively speaking. So if you can do that with a bath, which you absolutely will, you'll be sitting in the bath, but you'll be dumping sweat because it's so warm. That's because your core temperature is high and your body is trying to cool off. So that can be another easy way to do it. It can be as easy as turning off a fan. It can be as easy as turning on a shower of like hot, humid water close to you, if that's possible, or just taking a bath. Those are some really accessible ways. But this kind of ties full circle into what Amber just said in terms of placebo. If it affects you psychologically in a positive way, then it is absolutely performance enhancing and probably not a PED. So you can do it. Now, on the other side, if it's something that mentally inhibits you, then absolutely it is very much a thing that is going to make you slower. So if you find yourself in a situation, like Nate said, first time experiencing heat and you're not familiar with it, it will absolutely erode your ability to perform. Like that happens. So even if like there's one side where you can look at it an increasing plasma volume and all these markers inside your body, and on the other side, Tristan, if you can just get used to being hot, that will even just that will help you when you're talking about comfort and focus during that race when you're doing them, because North Carolina, you are going to be hot and humid for sure at those races. So there's just no air movement. It's really hot. So yeah, that's the cool part about heat training. It's super accessible. And everybody listening to this should absolutely go listen to the Science of Getting Faster episode with Dr. Chris Minson. It's so good. It's fantastic. And go to trainerroad.com/blog. We have great resources where we've organized all the information. Nate.
I want to say a mental thing too. You just said a different way. So you always hear people are like, I just melt in the heat. I do horrible in the heat. It's like they say that they're going to be horrible. Mm-hmm. And if you are like that, I want to say to have the mindset of, I'm going to be able to go deeper in the heat than anyone else. I'm not going to let that prevent me from going deep. I know this is going to hurt, and I'm just going to experience it more than everyone else. And that's how I'm going to compete on this day. Because everybody gets hot. Everyone's going to get hot. You don't actually experience it. Like if you took a core body temperature thing, I bet you don't get any hotter than anyone else. It's a mental thing that you can't take it in general. This is a generality. But if you come in the mindset of it's going to be hot, I expect it. This is like, how bad do you want it? But I'm just going to be able to handle the heat better than anyone else. You're going to outperform yourself with the compared to the other mindset.
And if you've been doing these simple steps of heat adaptation in one way or another, then you don't have to lie to yourself and say, I'm better prepared for anybody else. You have this really good concrete track record of things you've done to prepare yourself for that. So it makes it a whole lot easier to believe, right? Sorry, Amber, I interrupted.
Oh, not at all. I was just going to say that mental preparation is key, because what you're doing is you're differentiating the sensation from your abilities, right? So oftentimes you get in a situation where you feel worse than you would expect, and you think it's because, oh, I'm not that fit, I'm not that strong, I'm not up for the challenge. But that's not the case. If you know that this is going to be uncomfortable in a very specific way, if it's your first time in the heat, it's just about heat adaptation. It's not about your fitness. It's not because you're not a good athlete. It's not about your ability. It's just about you're going to need to adapt a little bit. And if you can differentiate those two things, it won't undermine your confidence so much.
Don't let bad sensations predefine your abilities. I like that.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Amber. Tom has like one of the most practical questions ever, and I'm surprised it's never been asked. It's a good one. By the way, you can submit your questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. You do that every week, and I appreciate it so much. So if you have a question about training, about racing, performance, anything like that, about equipment, who knows, go to trainerroad.com/podcast and submit it now. And then hopefully we'll be able to cover it next week or in coming weeks. Tom says, hey gang, thanks for the terrific podcast. You're all so inviting that it seems like a safe space to ask what might seem like an obvious question that's in the roots of the weeds. He says, I'm wondering about drinking while on the bike. And he also says pupils dilate and Chad sits up.
If I may interject, I did read the question to that point and checked out and started looking up ethanol metabolism and thought, oh no, I got this one. And I didn't have anything good to share, nothing positive. It's all garbage. But I did want to get into
That's
this.
It's a mindset of where he's at. Nothing. Can't drink, so it's not good.
Mindset matters.
Yeah. After that, none of these words registered, so I can't help you guys on this one.
He says, sorry, not that kind of drinking. From your podcast, I feel pretty comfortable with what to drink, how much, and how often. But my question is whether you have any tips or tricks on how to drink during tougher intervals. I'm always trying to manage my heart rate during these threshold or long VO2 max intervals by carefully controlling my breathing. But the second I take a drink, my heart rate spikes and I'm back to gasping for a short time. I understand the physiology behind this, but I'm wondering if you could share what you do. Frequent short sips timed with your breathing, which feels like many paper cuts, he says, or just taking the hit from a big swig. Waiting for rest periods is fine, but you can't do that during a race. So I'd like to train to have an approach in races as well. He says, who'd have thought Thursdays would have become one of my favorite days of the week? Thanks for everything, from Tom.
Aw.
Yeah, that's a great one. Amber, you're the pro racer who has probably had to take drinks in super compromising positions too. Not only like you're breathing really heavy, but you're probably got riders going all over the place. How do you time? This seems like a really simple question, but I bet it's going to be an enlightening one for a lot of people. When do you drink? When you're doing an interval workout or during a race?
I strongly prefer to wait for rest intervals. So during a workout, I will sip during rest intervals, but I'll do that even if it's a 10-second or a 30-second rest interval, right? I won't have to wait for a 5-minute rest interval. And in a race, if it's not a solo time trial, if it's the mass start race, there are always moments in the race where the race slows down and you have even just a micro recovery. It might just be 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So one of the things that you can practice, surprisingly, is your proprioception. So knowing exactly where to reach to grab that bottle without looking and being able to put it back without looking and being able to do that quickly is a really great skill, because you can, the second you see, an attack's just been covered, there's a lull in the field, you can grab that bottle, take a swig, put it back super fast. And if you watch the pro peloton, you'll see these guys, and gals, grab their bottles super fast, take a swig, put it down. They're really, really fast and efficient with this. So it's less about managing heart rate, and it's actually more about your technique of being able to get the bottle out and put it back quickly. And that way you can be kind of like a little hydration sniper, right? The second you have that opportunity, you just grab it, you get the fluid down, and then you're back at it. And the better you get at that, the more you can take advantage of those micro recoveries to get a drink in. If you're on a solo TT and that's your event, then that's a different story. You still want to train that proprioception because you want to be really fast and efficient with that, because you don't want to break out of the aero position any longer than you need to. But there may be no way around that elevation in heart rate. But if you train that, okay, this is how it's going to feel, and I know that I'm going to recover from that. And then you can have that confidence that even that little perturbation in your heart rate isn't necessarily going to derail your pacing or derail your performance.
This is one of the reasons why I really like hydration packs for mountain biking and gravel events, because it's just less to do to drink. You can have that little that little hose right there, so then you can just drink whenever you need, and there's less to do with the whole operation. Because you do get more efficient with it. I don't know if you've noticed too, when you switch bikes and you have different bottle cages, or that bottle cage is in a slightly different spot, or you switch bottles and for some reason it's different, it throws you off and suddenly it matters more. I kind of want to focus on one thing that Tom said here, where Tom said, I'm always trying to manage my heart rate during threshold or long VO2 max intervals by carefully controlling my breathing. I think that, so if this is something you haven't paid attention to before, Tom, and you're just really new to that concept and doing it, then it's a great thing to do. But if you feel like your focus, as soon as it shifts from breathing and it shifts from that it gets out of control, I would argue that you might be focusing a little too much on this. Because first of all, you're elastic. You don't have to be perfectly static. Your breathing rate can change and it can be briefly interrupted. This will happen in races. This will happen for many different, whether you swallowed a bug or whether anything happens, like you're going to have moments where you can't maintain perfect breathing, can't maintain that focus on maintaining your heart rate. It's okay. Don't worry about that changing. And if a drink messes that up, but then you return back to normal within a handful of seconds, that's also okay. So don't feel like everybody else out there is taking drinks and it's not affecting anything and you're the only one. If you're focusing too much on that breathing and making it absolutely perfect, that might actually come to become a hindrance if it's too much of a focus for you. But I, like Amber, in between intervals. In fact, I actually went through like a pretty long phase where I felt like if I didn't drink when I first started riding, so I would take a drink when I first started riding, and I would almost get addicted to that and get terrified of dry mouth. And if I had a dry mouth, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to take a drink. But I got to a point where I actually kind of just forced myself through that initial reaction of, oh my gosh, I've got dry mouth. This is going to be like, I'm thirsty. I need to drink. And when I got through that, because I was still drinking a bottle an hour, so I'm still getting the amount of fluid that I need. But when I was able to push through that initial dry mouth response, it was like my body deconditioned that. And now I got to the point where I was like, you know what? If I'm breathing hard and a drink does sound good right now, but my interval doesn't end for 10 minutes, I'm fine. I'll make it through the 10 minutes. And then in that rest, I will drink. I'll be able to do it then. So I'd challenge, I mean, unless you're doing like 2-hour intervals or 1-hour intervals or something like that, I'd challenge the concept that you can't wait to be able to do it. You can take in a whole lot of drink in between those work intervals and that rest. How about you, Chad? You've done a ton of crit racing too, where you're like, getting drinks and stuff is also tricky because it removes your focus for a while.
Yeah, I think Amber basically covered it. In situations of high intensity and criteriums are there was a period of time where I couldn't imagine getting a drink during a criterium. But as you learn to relax, learn to move through the field better, aren't always attacking like I used to be all the time. But I mean, you find opportunities to eat, and you do need to grease that groove, right? That movement pattern needs to be so familiar that it's basically an unconscious action. You recognize the need for thirst, you recognize the opportunity to grab a drink. Before you know it, you've already done it. The bottle's back in the cage and you're still riding. So I think it definitely comes about with practice. And I do think when the option presents itself and you can ride with the hydration pack, that's absolutely the way to go. It's so easy, so much easier to stay on top of your hydration when you have a backpack and a hose hanging in your face.
I just noticed that Amber took a drink. It was her rest interval. She just
Chad was giving me a rest interval. He was taking the poll. I was getting a rest back here. I actually, a director of ours years and years ago, early on my career, used to get on the radio when we were racing with radios. And whenever there was a lull in the race and say, eat, drink, and be merry. And it just became this little mantra of mine. And so we would joke about it, but then it got to the point where we would say that to each other on the race radio. As soon as we realized that there was a lull where we didn't have to be really on point at that moment, one of us would get on the radio and remind everybody else, eat, drink, and be merry. And it's now this little recurring phrase in my mind. And I hear it. I say it to myself during workouts. I say it to myself during races. Like anytime there's just a lull in a moment, it's like, okay, eat, drink, and be merry. So that's the time to get your hydration in. If you need to, usually get your fuel in, and just those being mindful of those micro recoveries, even on a group ride or a long solo ride, just have a little, it can help to have a visual trigger or something that reminds you like, okay, you're chill right now, grab a bottle. And if it's on a group ride or something, if you see someone else take a bottle, take your bottle, right? Like allow yourself to use those visual triggers to remind yourself. But training the technique of it is definitely a very, very helpful way to approach it.
How often in the pro peloton do people attack when other people are drinking on purpose? I mean, I've done it where I see the rear camera. I didn't know someone was eating, but they were like eating a bar and it's like hanging in their mouth. It's really hard to follow someone when you only have one hand available, or you have it like dangling from your mouth and you can only breathe a certain way.
Yeah. Less effective in the pro peloton, because if somebody has a bar in their mouth or they're taking a drink, they'll just chuck it to follow the attack, and then they'll go get something else from the team car later. So it's less effective. I would say that's less of a selection opportunity than, other aspects of the race.
I know it definitely happens in triathlon. In aid stations. Some people will just blow through aid stations because thinking it makes the person who's running with them. This is on the run. That's why they're running. It makes them have to have a choice: is I'm going to hydrate, or I'm going to try to stay with this person and not make the emotional rupper band strategy. Snap. Yeah, and I kind of think of it as bad form to purposely wait for someone to take a drink to attack. But there's no rule against it. Do whatever you want.
We see
everybody's got
a mountain biking.
You should drink more earlier. Yeah.
At World Championships this year, we saw it plenty of times. Actually, all throughout the World Cups, whenever anybody went into a feed zone, like the other riders, or they would all go through the feed zone. Whenever somebody would take a bottle, they were attacking. I remember Nino
Oh.
doing this. I remember Vanderpool doing this. I remember, all of them, Matthias, like all of the men. And then you saw everybody trying to do it to Luana Lecomte, but it just simply didn't matter because she's too fast. But like, this is common and there are no rules against it. And in my opinion, it's fine. Like, go ahead and do it. I've never attacked somebody in a feed zone. I've never done that, but I absolutely would do it. Like if it's coming down to it and I want to race, like Amber said, I think it was last week, when you race, you're entering the arena of competition and there are rules that are written out and you don't want to transgress those rules, but you know, that happens. That's part of it. So you do have to be kind of wary. Like if you are taking a drink mid effort or you're doing like, I have attacked when people are drinking. And it's typically when after somebody attacks hard in a crit and then somebody is going to sit up, I know people are going to be relaxing, whether they're drinking or not. I know they're going to be relaxing. And that's when I hit them. That's why counterattacks are productive, right? Is because people have done something hard and they want relaxation. They want that thing. So catch them wanting while you are just, giving them exactly the last thing that they don't want.
And you want to drink during like Amber said, the times where there's a big lull, and you don't want to be like what John said before, is I have some dry mouth. If we're 1v1, we're in a breakaway, last lap on a crit, and you're stupid enough to like take a drink because you don't want dry mouth, where it's not going to impact your hydration at all, like
you're going to lose.
Maybe I would. Yeah. Like don't be mad at the other person for doing that. You can say I have a rule against this, but how silly would that be if anytime someone attacked when someone else was drinking, everyone's like foul play. So I would not get that into your head as like, this is the way that it should be. Cause I've heard people say that, like, don't do that. But that's a tough way. Most of the times too, when people attack, you don't even see that the other person's drinking. Like I said, that rear camera, you don't even notice after the fact you have a camera. Just, the time was right. And a lot of times, like John said, it's a lull. Not many times people attack where it's like, everyone's like at 110%. And then they
which by the way is the best time to attack, just FYI.
When everyone's 110%.
Yeah.
Well, it's only if you're at 90 and they're at 110.
Exactly. Please, Amber, go ahead.
I was just going to clarify one point. So there is an unspoken rule of etiquette, which is to not attack in a feed zone. And that applies to road racing specifically. So it's not considered good form to attack in a feed zone. It's not against the rules. People absolutely do this. But it's like kind of frowned down upon, but that's different than attacking when some individual happens to be drinking or eating in the middle of the group at a point that's between the feed stations. I just wanted to make that clarification.
It's different in mountain biking, different in Ironman. Ironman, Macca's like knocking cups out of people's hands, almost like just taking every cup. So what happens in Ironman?
Flipping the table over.
The aid stations are long and huge, but the first person in gets the choice of their drinks and the first sponges, and the second person gets what the volunteers are still holding. So people will run through there. Last aid station, boom, 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 take every cup, and they want every thing of water on them, right? And they'll be pouring Coke on them because there's going to get evaporative cooling inside of that. But also, like Macca, who's a famous like mind game strategist, you're behind him. You're like, oh, I was expecting 15 cups to pour on myself, and I get 3. And then it gets hot, and you're like, how can I do this? This person's a lot cooler than me. The mindset, and there's also probably an actual core temperature difference. That is well within the rules.
The rules of play.
I've never heard anyone complain about. Yeah, exactly. You should have ran faster into the aid station, really. And people do that. They race into the aid station to get that first person, be the first one in to get that ability.
Yeah, and I mean the opposite also happens. When riders don't get a bottle and they tried to get it, you'll see riders then turn the screws on that athlete because they know that they want something right now that they can't have. They're probably in a bad mental state. Even if it's not that they're going to become dehydrated from missing that bottle, they're distracted. And it's an opportunity for you. I know, Tom, we're kind of drifting. Go ahead.
I gotta say this. If you're an age grouper and it's an Ironman aid station, don't go through and knock all the things out of people's hands so you can behind you. But I have.
Nate said it was okay.
I've definitely done this in a small race. An aid station might have 2 people and they might be holding up 4 cups. And I am racing for a podium position against somebody. I'll grab all 4 cups coming in and I'll use all 4 cups. Like I might drink all of them. but the person behind me either has to slow down or they should have gone in faster, or, they get something they don't want. And to me, in my mind, I don't think there's any, oh, I got to only take half of these because all these people behind me need it. No, go faster. Like, be ahead of me, and then you can do that, or have space, or just stop. Like, you can go to the aid station table and get some too. There's all these choices where you can do stuff in there, and I shouldn't be limited by the amount I get, but I'm not also knocking them out of their hands. I think that's a little suspect. I want
to hear everybody's opinions on this in the TrainerRoad forum, whether it's attacking in feed zones, whether it's attacking when somebody is feeding, or when we're talking about the triathlon stuff. I want to hear everybody's thoughts on this, where they stand personally, where you stand, and then just generally where you stand too. Perhaps what you've done differs from how you believe it should go.
Some volunteers too in this situation, like, you try to take two and they'll be like, nope, this is for the person behind you.
Yeah.
And they won't let you do it. Which is also annoying. In that situation, I could stop. And, if I really needed an extra cup and I didn't think I was going to finish the race without it.
I think Patrick Lange grabbed the 2-liter thing of Coke at Kona, like back in 2019, and he was just dumping the whole 2 liters on himself. And after he basically cleared the whole table, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, totally.
And no one was behind him. He was just hot. He was running like a 2:40 marathon or something.
It was insane. Yeah, what he was doing. Yeah. The last point I want to cover, Tom, you mentioned squeezing in timing drinks with your breaths. And I mean, you may be in a situation where this race is like longer than an hour and you are truly on the rivet the whole time and there is no time for you to rest. And if that is the case, then squeeze it in between breaths. But for me, that's a trap. If I'm trying to squeeze something in between breaths, it's because I'm not being as efficient as I should, or I'm not giving myself the chance to just be okay with waiting for the rest interval or waiting for the eventual rest. So it might be a good sign, Tom, if you find yourself squeezing it in between breaths like that, hey, you know what? I should calm down. I can relax. I'll be okay. I can take it a little bit later on. Okay, Stefan's question. He says, is bodyweight training a substitute for barbell strength training? You emphasize strength training a lot, so much, in fact, that I want to get a consistent strength routine going. Way to go, Stefan. Nice. Good to hear. You'll get faster and healthier. He says, I've read somewhere that a pistol squat should be roughly equal to a bodyweight barbell squat. So can I replace that and a deadlift with a resistance band deadlift? Well, those are not scientific, I would say. They're very different movements. And you're talking about a pistol squat and a barbell squat. Chad, we don't have to do a deep dive on this one. I just want to get across the principle for most of us cyclists. Is bodyweight strength training sufficient, or do they need to use weight?
It's sufficient till it isn't. So, I mean, we have to provide a stimulus that you're not capable of, or that exceeds what you can currently do to spur adaptation. And at some point, body weight's not going to be enough weight to do that anymore. So unless you're increasing body weight the whole time, which may happen to a small degree, but it's not going to happen. It's probably going to, your strength capabilities are going to outpace your increase in body weight if it's happening at all. So my point is that a pistol is only going to be heavy enough for so long, and then you can start doing more reps, but then you're not really targeting strength improvements so much as strength endurance improvements, and it becomes something else. Yeah. So initially it'll probably be plenty heavy enough. Pistols are hard, and then the full range is especially hard. And if you're trying to get the full range, that you're going to find a spot that's super weak, and that will be enough of a stimulus to bring about improvement. But once that improvement's achieved and your body's not any heavier, it's no longer going to be a sufficient stimulus.
I'd argue that for endurance athletes, you don't likely need to go far beyond body weight though. Like if you're chasing strength gains, it totally makes sense to start adding more strength. But if you're just chasing the ability to be functional and to be more well-rounded and everything else, I don't really know if you ever need to add weight. I'm probably over speaking here, it might be weight dependent on the individual.
There are some jacked people who just do body weight. And if you look online, there are very to Jad said, there are different things you can do to like progress them to make them harder and harder and harder. And with cycling, I like the idea of doing a lot of things that are more in the 15, 20 rep range. So it's another one is you can just add things up. You can do less rest in between, work on your muscular endurance rather than your like raw strength. And especially for mountain biking, that could be a huge thing. Yeah. So I think to your point, John, it's probably okay in general. But you're always going to be limited at some point.
Well, I said it on the last podcast that some of the body weight strength athletes, I mean, the people who focus specifically on calisthenics are some of the most impressive athletes I've ever seen. I mean, they're along the lines of gymnasts where they just have these bodies that can do dang near anything. Whether that makes them a faster, I'm sure that translates in some ways. I don't know.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to this though is that The thing that strength equipment or weights get you is you can just simply do other exercises that you can't do otherwise. Like kettlebell swings without a kettlebell. Yeah. It's not really much. So there are certain movements that you can do with equipment that you just simply can't do otherwise. That doesn't mean that you can't get functionally strong as a cyclist. I think you can for a lot of things. Once again, I always follow Derek Teal, my good friend. He also has a strength training for cyclist business. It's called Dialed Health, and he has like no equipment routines on there. And I personally feel that I still get sore with them when I don't do them for a long time, and I find that they are adequate for getting me to be a strong cyclist, just in general, outside in terms of physically strong outside of the context of just spinning my pedals around. So I think there's room for it. But Stefan, adding equipment, if it's a cost barrier, yeah, for sure. If it's like some sort of access barrier where you just don't have it around you at a gym or anything else like that, yeah, absolutely. Like you can do a ton while you don't have that. But also, I don't think that cyclists should be afraid of touching weights, because that's probably on the other end of the spectrum. A lot of cyclists would like, don't get heavy, and you're not going to get heavy. If only that was that easy, that we just got swollen gigantic every time we touched the weight. So Amber, you're going to say something?
I just want to jump in and say, for somebody who's just getting started with strength training, if you've never done strength training before, Bodyweight is a great way to go. It's a good place to start, because what you really want to do is establish good motor patterns and good form. And that's a lot easier to do with bodyweight stuff and even some modified stuff. So if you're somebody who struggles to do a push-up, you can start by leaning up against the back of your couch and doing push-ups that way. I mean, that is enough to get you started and start to create a stimulus for some people. And I just want to reiterate that is totally okay. That's completely legit. It's really effective. And then you move into, maybe a half push-up and a full push-up. So that's an example of using modified versions of different exercises. And you can get a lot of benefit out of just the body weight stuff, working on that form, creating a good foundation before you ever do need to introduce equipment and additional weight. So that's for maybe a different audience, but for people listening, I just wanted to jump in and say, if this is, you can come in and start pretty much anywhere, because there are different modified versions of movements that you can do that might be more accessible or approachable for you.
Well said, Amber. Well said. Nate, are you getting jacked and swole? Is that your focus now? Just on getting strong?
Yep.
You're moving past body weight, then I assume.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah. There we go.
I real strong.
And we should too differentiate between being strong and being max strength strong. I mean, you can use body weight exercise and calisthenics to get very, very strong. In chasing max strength improvements do require more and more and more and more weight, which, like I said,
Right.
body weight training can't furnish, but that's not really what we're after. So I do think the body weight can go a long ways. And oh man, I had another point I wanted to make. Give me a minute. Come back.
Yeah. I want to talk about.
I'm not going for strength. I'm going for like looking good. So that's slightly different. And I'm not going for like sports performance, right? And the way that I lift is more of the hypertrophy. I never say that word.
Hypertrophy.
8 to 15 reps like that. Not the like neuromuscular stuff. And that is a lot because of that range gets kind of narrow, and the incremental like increase. It is a lot easier with weights than without. But to Chad's point, I see it all the time online. I totally agree with Chad. Some of the best physiques I've seen have been calisthenic people. And then also they can do amazing things.
That reminds me of the thing I was trying to think of was they did compare, and this wasn't a study, but it was a comparison amongst a couple athletes, I think for like Cali Moves or one of the calisthenic websites, where if you could do a planche push-up. So a planche is, basically your hands are on the floor and your body is miraculously suspended behind you at an upward angle. That's the planche itself, but to actually do a push-up from a planche position, so get all the way down to the floor and then back up, equated to having a 2 times body weight bench press or something along those lines.
Wow.
It was ridiculous how much strength they had cultivated by only moving their body weight. So that's something very much in favor of body weight strength and strength training.
Nice.
That would be amazing to be that strong, by the way, to be able to make yourself float, basically. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. Amber, did you have anything else that you wanted to jump in on?
No, I'm good now.
Awesome. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. We had a very deep dive on stretching. We talked about heat training. We talked about body weight training. And also we talked about drinking in a very practical application for all of us cyclists and controversial feed zone tactics. So head over to the forum, trainerroad.com/forum. This episode is episode 352. Jump over there. Tell us how you feel about those points and any other questions that you have, whether it's on stretching, whether it's on different modalities. We got a ton of live questions about everything from massage guns to cold plunges to all this stuff that kind of tend to be related to what we were talking about. We didn't have time to go through those. So jump over there to the forum. Let's chat about it. Go to trainerroad.com, sign up. And if you are signed up for TrainerRoad, it means so much if you shared this with everybody else. So share TrainerRoad with them, get them to sign up, get them to get faster. You can do outside workouts so you can continue to train as you wish, and you can lower the volume and get fast year round. Use adaptive training. It'll still work with your outside stuff in the future. It's really exciting. So with all that said, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone.